History's complicated. It's full of shades of grey. The interpretation of it's always changing. But I must admit, I was rather surprised when University of Cambridge's Department for Anglo-Saxon History said there's no such thing as Anglo-Saxons. In recent years, some historians and medieval scholars have argued that the term Anglo-Saxon is misleading. The traditional narrative describes Anglo-Saxons as Germanic tribes, Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, who migrated to Britain after the Roman withdrawal in the 5th century. That label's been used for centuries to describe medieval English culture, language and political structures. But some scholars argue that it oversimplifies a complex and fluid migration period. That's probably true. The more we look at it, the less clear it becomes. Early medieval Britain was more ethnically and culturally mixed than some older textbooks suggested, partly because of the migration of the Anglo-Saxons. The label in modern terms has been appropriated by those we'd like to call extremist or racist, those people who have roots in Anglo-Saxons. Some academic departments have shifted their terminology towards early medieval England rather than Anglo-Saxon studies. They don't want to trigger people. But Anglo-Saxon isn't just an academic term. It's tied to the development of the English language, the foundations of English law, the cultural continuity of a millennia, national history. So when the label's questioned, it can feel like history itself's being erased. And an emotional response isn't irrational. Historical narratives provide social construct. They anchor identity. They create shared reference points, possibly an identity that's inconvenient. So now the ethnicity didn't exist. Well, universities operate in cultural environments shaped by contemporary politics, and there's increasing sensitivity around racial categories in historic framing. Scholars may genuinely want to avoid terms that could be misused, or could be wanting to score brownie points for themselves in the woke Olympics. But is it revisionism? History's always being revised in light of new evidence. When I look at my history books on my shelf, take Boudica. Well, Boudica, that everywhere you go now, Boudica this, Boudica that, go to a museum, they've got something about Boudica. Only 30 years ago it was Boudicca. It's constantly changing. And is it true? Who knows? We're told it is. I'll go with Boudica. But it's not controversial to say that the pronunciation that was received and normal has become unacceptable and uneducated to use. If scholars believe Anglo-Saxon is imprecise, they should argue the case publicly, rather than just ruling that there's no such thing as the Anglo-Saxon ethnicity. Because if there isn't, what is the ethnicity they're discussing? See, I don't hear very often there's no such thing as Nigerian. But it would be a rational point. There are Igbo, there are Hausa, there are a dozen different tribes and languages. They're all distinct ethnic groups. They all fall within Nigeria. Someone could be Igbo and Nigerian. In fact, if you're Igbo, you are Nigerian. If you're Nigerian, you're not necessarily Igbo. But when we look at Britain, why is it that British history has to be reinterpreted in this way? Is it that we have a lazy understanding of how it evolved, or really an understanding based on later sources? A phrase that was given, that's normal. Byzantium, the people of Constantinople didn't call themselves Byzantine. That phrase was plucked from the air many years later, centuries after the walls fell. It was because a definition was needed that separated them from other Romans. You needed to understand that empire as a separate entity, so we called them Byzantines. Not particularly controversial to call someone Byzantine, but suddenly it's controversial to say that there was an ethnicity of Anglo-Saxon. Maybe my suspicion of the motivation behind this is how it comes at a time when the British Museum claims that half of samurais were women. Well, not true. Or historians claim that large group of Vikings were Muslims and black. No, they weren't. When academics play so fast and loose and liberal with reality in order to score themselves a headline or the glory of being more anti-racist, then it's only fair to be suspicious when academics say your ethnicity doesn't exist.